Good day. My name is the Reverend Krista Taves, and I'm the Minister of Congregational Life at Elliott Unitarian Chapel. On behalf of myself and lead minister Reverend Barbara Gaydon, I offer a warm welcome to all of you who have come to celebrate and honor the life of Rudi Heider. I am joined by Chaplain Burt and Campbell of Friendship Village, who helped prepare this service and ensured that it is available to the residents of Friendship Village. We are so glad you are all here. Thank you for coming. We come from many walks of life and from near and far. Rudi's immediate family and extended family, his dear friends at Friendship Village, his church family at Elliott Chapel, those he worked with, and many other friends. We are here to offer comfort and support to all who loved him and those who mourn his passing. In the Unitarian Universalist tradition, we light a chalice, symbol of our faith, to represent that we have entered sacred space and are preparing to give and receive the blessing of beloved community that happens when we gather together. Bob and Kay Boyd, longtime members of Elliott Chapel and good friends of Rudi and Lorraine, will light our chalice.
In Unitarian Universalism, we treasure knowledge and curiosity. We trust in human relationships to create goodness, kindness, and healing. Rudi delighted in learning and devoted himself to his friends and family. This was the energizing anchor of Rudi's life, his reason for being. We light this chalice in his honor.
In Unitarian Universalism, we believe in a loving universal force that asks us to take care of each other and this world, for it is here that we create our heavens and our hells. So we focus on this life, this one precious life, and ask that we make it a lifelong commitment to leave this world better than we arrived in it. So let us be present in this time, in this place, with these gathered people, as we journey through Rudi's precious life. For in every life rests the seeds of truth and wisdom, that deeper calling to love one another and to be good to ourselves. This is how the Spirit, that some call God, moves in and among us, and through all that is.
come to me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the land, giving life the shape of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me.
Hello, everyone. I'm Chaplain Burt Campbell from Friendship Village, Chesterfield. It's my privilege and honor to take part in this time of honoring Rudi Heider. And over the last 3+ years, I am grateful not only to have served Rudi as chaplain here at the village, but to count him as a dear friend and I to him. What a marvelous opportunity this is for us to come together. I want to share just a couple of readings for us today, and then some of the folks from here at the village, we've recorded messages from them, and we will have them share as well, and then I'll share a few remarks about my time with Rudi as well. But first, these two readings. First, a reading from the book of Ecclesiastes, written by King Solomon, and then a short poem by Walt Whitman. Hear what Solomon writes in the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 3. He says, "There is a time for everything, and a season for every activity under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to scatter stones and a time to gather them, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to search and a time to give up, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to mend, a time to be silent and a time to speak, a time to love, a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. But what do workers gain from their toil? I have seen the burden God has laid on the human race. He has made everything beautiful in its time." Today, we're going to have an opportunity to hear many treasured memories about Rudi and the way he touched our lives. And as I think of this passage from Ecclesiastes, it makes me mindful of the many facets of Rudi's life, and yet this underlying truth that remains. The book here says that God makes everything beautiful in its time. And when we look over the fullness of Rudi's life, we see a work of wonder. We see a man of many talents, a man of great intellect and deep thought, a man of great care. And I believe with all my heart that God has a way of touching every human life, working through the various situations and occasions that rise in a lifetime, and making it beautiful in the end. Not just the end, but all the way through. We certainly see that in Rudi Heider. Of course, there's more to life, I believe, than this world. People have different views on this. Listen to what Walt Whitman had to say in his famous small poem called Intimations of Immortality. Whitman writes, "What though the radiance, which was once so bright, be now forever taken from my sight? Though nothing can bring back the hour of splendor in the grass, of glory in the flower, we will grieve not, rather find strength in what remains behind. Whitman speaks to the difference a life can make as one life touches many others. And in that, there is certainly a beauty to be discovered as we have been indeed touched by Rudi and his many gifts, his many talents, and his much love. With that thought, we're going to pause here for a moment and allow some friends that Rudi asked if they could share in this moment. So here are a few voices from Friendship Village with their thoughts about Rudi Heider.
I met Rudi through a friend, Bill Alexander. Bill Alexander helped me every day except Sunday in the big garden. Rudi helped me in the same garden for 13 years until he had to go into the healthcare center. When Rudi turned 100, I told him, "I think it's time for you to retire from my garden." His answer to me was, "Get me some more plants." So I got him 2 kneeling pads and more plants, and away he went planting. I can still see him pedaling down the hall in his wheelchair to exercise classes twice a week. Rudi always had a smile when I met him in the halls and always put his hand out for a handshake. There will never be another Rudi. Thank you.
I'm Jim Pierce, longtime friend and a colleague of Rudi, and very happy to have this opportunity to make a few remarks about him. In the early 1960s, the Community College of St. Louis opened up 3 campuses, and one of them was in Kirkwood at the Merrimack campus. And Rudi was hired to open its chemistry department. And in fact, Rudi was one of the first community college faculty members to be engaged, and he was brought in and set the standard of being the first full professor at Merrimack, and also one of the first full professors in the entire community college and its 3 campuses. Rudi went on to enrich the lives of many students in many years. And at Merrimack's opening, until permanent buildings were complete, our classrooms and offices were in very close quarters. But we got to know each other, and Rudi and I discovered a share in interest in classical music. We not only went to concerts, we enjoyed trying to play. So one day, Rudi and his lovely wife, Lorraine, invited my wife and Joy and me to join them for lunch and a chamber music session. With Rudi at the piano, Joy, the only professional musician in our group, on violin, and me on the cello, which I had been taking lessons at least 2 or 3 weeks. I can't remember how long we stayed at it, but I can tell you we never tried it again. After Rudi retired, we hadn't seen him for several years, and what a delightful surprise it was to walk into the dining room at Friendship Village for our first meal as residents in the year 2005 and find Rudi at a nearby table. And over the last 15 years, we once again shared our mutual interests in the sciences and in music. With his smile, his friendly smile, bright, frank, and honest mind, and can-do attitude, Rudi was a much loved and highly regarded friend to many at Friendship Village. We're just grateful that our special memories we have of our friend Rudi Heider.
My name is Fred Tuttle. I'm very glad to know Rudi as a friend, and we enjoyed working together at the Ethical Society. It was quite a shock to hear that Rudi had died, and I think the reason that we were such good friends was that early in our lives as children, we were sort of scorned by our compatriots as being not so smart. But anyway, Rudi was a very nice guy, and I enjoyed working with him.
Rudi Heider was born in Methuen, Massachusetts in 1913. His father's family immigrated from Germany, his mother's family from Austria. Rudi was an only child, but both his parents had large extended families which gathered frequently. Rudi's father worked for the Boston and Maine Railroad, and his dream was to own land. And his good job led to the realization of this dream, and the family owned a small farm, which is where Rudi grew up. Early on, it was clear that Rudi was musically talented. He played the violin and piano, and at one point even considered a career in music, going so far as to play for Arthur Fiedler of the Boston Pops. But alas, music was not his calling, although he did play the violin his whole life. Instead, he completed his undergraduate degree in chemical engineering at Northeastern University. A humorous story from his undergraduate years. Apparently, there was a classmate, not well liked, who went home for Christmas. And those who remained behind, including Rudi, dismantled his Model T Ford and rebuilt it in the classmates' dorm room. This is a great glimpse into Rudi's sense of humor. Rudi pursued his graduate studies at Purdue, achieving a master's and PhD in chemistry. And upon graduation, he interviewed with Monsanto. And this is another humorous story. Apparently, he was taking the train to Dayton for the interview and was reading a chemistry journal. And he happened to be sitting across from the man who was going to interview him. And by the time they arrived in Dayton, Rudi already had the job. So Rudi moved to Dayton. And this is where he met his wife, Lorraine. Lorraine was a nanny, and she also worked for the government during the war in the Army Air Corps. They were married in 1942 in the living room of the Maddox family for whom she worked. And Gordon Maddox, the child she cared for, became a lifelong friend of the family, along with his wife, Dorothy. When Lorraine became pregnant in 1943, she received her discharge papers, and their son, Robert, was born shortly after. These years were shaped by World War II, and Rudi got a front row seat to the devastation in Europe after the ending of the war. Because he spoke and read German, he was sent by Monsanto to review as many records as he could of the vast scientific studies undertaken by the Third Reich, and he was charged to bring back anything considered useful and beneficial to Monsanto and the United States. This was a life-changing experience for him. Monsanto was a growing company, and Rudi transferred from Dayton to the Texas Gulf Coast and then to Springfield, Massachusetts. And for many of these moves, Rudi's parents moved with him, and Robert grew up with his grandparents close by. But when Rudi transferred to St. Louis from Springfield in 1961, Rudi's parents stayed in Massachusetts. One of the things Rudi and Lorraine were exceptionally good at was creating a new social circle with each move. That Rudi worked for such a large company was helpful because they could make friends with other Monsanto families. But they also created their own circles and really enjoyed potluck dinners and game nights. And they brought this with them to St. Louis. And in St. Louis, they also began attending Elliott Chapel. Lorraine had been born a Universalist, and it just made sense, given who they were and their convictions about the ultimacy of life and the deepest values that you should bring to your life. For many years, Lorraine carried the distinguished responsibility of mimeographing and mailing out the Elliott Chapel newsletter. She didn't drive and would take the bus from Creve Coeur to Elliott Chapel. And apparently, she knew everyone's zip code by heart. Lorraine was also an avid knitter, and many Elliott families sported her Heider hats. Rudi and Lorraine also had a large circle of friends who joined their Sunday potluck, bridge, and masterpiece theater evenings. Their son Bob knew never to call on Sunday night. It was a good life, with many good friends, good community, good work, good colleagues. Rudi mentored many people at Monsanto, and often they became lifelong friends. He also taught chemistry at Merrimack Community College after retiring from Monsanto, and he loved it. Rudi and Lorraine also traveled a lot. They were fascinated by Mexico, and they learned Spanish. They didn't do resort vacations. They focused on the small towns and being with the people and the language and the culture. One of their friends from this part of their lives was Lion Carew, a nutrition professor from the University of Vermont who worked on diet improvement in Central America. He was the son-in-law of one of Rudi's colleagues, Bud Harrington. Rudi had a lifelong friendship with Lion, and they spoke to each other in Spanish. When their son Bob married, and then had 2 children, Catherine and Matt, Rudi and Lorraine's life became even richer. Matt and Rudi especially had a very rich relationship. This is what Matt has to say about his grandfather. My grandfather was one of the most down-to-earth, generous people I have ever met in my life. He was a rock. He was always there, warm and loving, good-natured, outgoing. He told my wife, Janet, that he'd never met a stranger. He was wise about life. He taught me how to bake, and he always made time for me. He had such a positive attitude, and he was optimistic. We even had nicknames for each other. He was Senior Sage, I was Junior Sage. Matt's description of Rudi gives us some indication of what drew so many people into his life. As Rudi and Lorraine aged, there were health challenges. Lorraine started to lose her sight, and then they made the difficult decision that she needed to move into long-term care. She went to Delmar Gardens in Creve Coeur, and she died in 2004. This was very hard for Rudi. He was devoted to Lorraine. But he faced a much larger challenge in 2007 when his granddaughter Catherine died in an automobile accident. This loss shook the entire family, and many loved ones noted that Rudi, with his normal optimism and upbeat spirit, struggled to work through this loss. When it became apparent that Rudi also needed a higher level of care, he chose Friendship Village in Chesterfield, where many of his friends and colleagues lived. This started a whole new phase of his life, one that he embraced and enjoyed. I invite Chaplain Burt Campbell to share about these years of Rudi's long life.
I met Rudi Heider a little over 3 years ago when I began service here at Friendship Village and started to get to know Rudi through regular visits and conversations. In those days, I found Rudi to be amazingly resilient. As I started my service here that summer, Rudi had taken a tumble. Rudi, who was so active on our campus for so long and in so many ways, had driven his scooter around our lake and around a sidewalk and gotten off the path there a little bit and took a tumble and brought great injury to his neck. And so when I met Rudi, there he was in his neck brace. And I remember staff being greatly concerned for Rudi. It was very uncomfortable for him, and they wondered how he would fare in the days and months to come. But Rudi, in his amazing perseverance and resilience, wore that brace for well over a year and made it work. Found a way not to let it stop him, still found ways to come to the cafeteria and visit friends and be engaged in activities here at Friendship Village. Rudi was renowned for being a bocce player. Every Wednesday, residents gather and they play bocce. And then Rudi would come in his chair and still throw the ball and make that contact and wasn't half bad. He found a way to remain incredibly active. Of course, one of the things that I found fascinating about Rudi was his history, his time in chemistry, his great love of science. What a keen mind, what a great intellect. And he and I had the opportunity to share many discussions about the world, about issues of faith as well. Rudi was a complex man, and his views of theology were a little bit all over the map. Of course, a strong believer in science, a strong believer in how things come together in the physical world, and yet maintaining a curiosity about a God. Is he really there to be found? Of course, one of Rudi's very best friends here at the village was the late Mr. Bill Alexander, who shared his room and great camaraderie with Rudi for so long. Bill was a strong Episcopalian, and as Bill was no longer able to attend services at his own church, long before my arrival here at the village, Bill would bring Rudi to regular Sunday services here at Friendship Village, and Rudi would be there, sit next to Bill, would always listen intently. And in the time that I had opportunity to serve Rudi with both a friendship and a personal connection, but also as chaplain, there were many sermons that Rudi would comment on and be thankful for and express appreciation for. Of course, our services here at the village are open to anyone who comes, regardless of their faith background or maybe a secular understanding, but they have an openness to shared community and a time of interacting with people of faith. We open our services to all, and Rudi would regularly participate, sing the hymns, read the scriptures, recite our recitations, our sayings together, would share in our monthly time of communion. In fact, it became very important to him over time as Rudi continued to stay open to the idea of a God and the meaning that theology brings to everyday living. I was greatly challenged by Rudi's intellect, found him to be such a deep thinker, and yet such a kind man. Rudi was always very kind, not just to me, but to others and to other residents. And I have deep and lasting affection for Rudi. I'm thankful for his attentive ear. I'm thankful for his openness of heart. I'm thankful for his willingness to discuss and share his own thoughts as he worked through his own belief system as well. Mostly, I'm thankful for the amazing confidence and smile that Rudi chose to live this life with. Of course, I can only speak to these last 3 years of knowing Rudi, but I can tell you in that time, he brought great joy to many, both residents and staff alike. Very grateful to have known him. I already miss him deeply, And I am thankful personally to God for the privilege of having been touched by Rudi's life. Thanks for listening today. It's an honor to share in this time of memorializing Rudi Heider. Thank you.
Obviously, Rudi loved his life at Friendship Village. He offered mindfulness meditation classes. He joined the dietary committee. When he was in his late 90s and early hundreds, he was still using his computer, reading the New York Times and his other newspapers, and studying Spanish. Also remarkable is that he opened his heart up again and began a relationship with a resident at Friendship Village, Monica Roberts. He gave up studying Spanish and switched to German, his first language as a child, because that's what Monica spoke. He even danced until he fell out of his wheelchair on his way to visit her one day. This is what Monica would like to share about Rudi. Rudi was a class act and a real gentleman. I learned a lot from him. He had a wealth of knowledge. I enjoyed the coffee hours we had and the daily phone calls. He called every morning between 9 a.m. and 9:30. I loved him very much. Also notable is that when his grandson Matt married Janet, Rudi and Janet instantly became fast friends, and he considered her his special granddaughter. They spoke on the phone every week without fail. At age 100, Rudi had another significant change of life. He had a stroke, and this meant moving out of independent living and into full care. And this was a challenging move. It became more difficult to stay connected to his friends, but knowing Rudi, he found other ways to keep life meaningful and fresh. To his friends and family, it just felt like Rudi would keep living. Janet began a tradition of trying to make each birthday the best because it might be the last. She outdid herself many, many times. This March, Rudi was one of the residents of Friendship Village to contract COVID-19, and he recovered miraculously for someone 107 years old who had survived a stroke. Thanks to granddaughter Janet, his story went viral, and people around the world read about the man who survived COVID-19 and the 1918 pandemic. His son Bob talks about how difficult it was to not be with his father when he was ill. Friendship Village had locked down like all long-term facilities did to protect residents from COVID. But they stayed in touch by phone, and in one conversation, Rudi shared with Bob that he would really like to share a beer. You see, Rudi loved dark German beer. And when Bob was able to visit again, they shared that beer together. It was a precious moment. Shortly after this, Bob received a call that Rudi was struggling. He went to his father's side and was with him until he peacefully passed on July 17th, 2020. Rudi is survived by his son Robert and wife Donna, grandson Matthew and his wife Janet, and dear friend Monica. May he rest in peace. He will be dearly missed. Please join with me in the spirit of prayer and meditation as you are willing and able. Spirit of life, God of grace and mercy, universal source of all that is, that changes us as we cannot change ourselves. We give thanks for the long and rich life of Rudi Heider. We give thanks for his unique way of being, for he made this world a better and a kinder place. May we who mourn his death be granted the gifts of understanding. For those things left unfinished and unsaid, may we find acceptance and forgiveness. But mostly, let us express our deep gratitude for the many years we had with him. Gratitude for his joyful and generous way of being, his kindness, his curiosity, his attentiveness, his open heart, and his deep appreciation for all the blessings of his long life. The truth of his life endures, for it is woven into the fabric of the larger life of which we and he are all a part. Let us enter into a moment of silence in honor of Rudi Heider. As we bid Rudi farewell, let us be confident and trusting that a human life is full of meaning and purpose, even in death. For human life is a sacred thing. Its beginning is sacred. Its span of years is sacred. Its joys and sorrows are sacred, and its ending is sacred too. Let Rudi's name be inscribed on the tree of life forever. Amen, and blessed be. Bob and Kay Boyd will now extinguish our chalice. As we extinguish this chalice, the flame is now gone, but its light lives in our hearts. Rudi Heider, may the light of your life find peace and rest, and may your legacy now burn brightly in our hearts, for it is we who now carry your spirit in this life. Thank you all for joining us. Blessings on you and yours.